I would like to introduce Tracy Velázquez. She leads research for Pew Charitable Trusts on criminal justice, mental health, and public safety. Pew, along with John Jay College and NYU, have created this online tool called the Jail Data Initiative, and it gives real-time and detailed data for a third of jails in the entire country. So thousands of jails, lots of data that you can sort based on your geography. So you can look up data particular to your coverage area. It's also sortable by a number of different demographics, including race, which is something that Tracy will expand upon now. Like I said, feel free to have your laptops out for this as she goes through the tool, and we hope that it's something that you and your reporters find useful. Thanks.
All right. So good afternoon. I see that you all have been very busy this morning, so hopefully you won't mind sort of listening and playing around on a computer instead of doing sticky notes. Again, I'm excited to be here. I also wanted to introduce my colleague Abby in the corner there. She's the one who emailed you, and she's one of our media contacts. So if you have any questions about this or anything else that we do at Pew, please go ahead and reach out to her, either while you're here or in the future. So I wanted to talk a little bit, today we're going to talk about jails. And I wanted to give a quick overview of jails just because oftentimes when people are talking about the criminal justice system, jails are sort of like this thing that we know is there, but we're really not sure what's going on with them. I noticed when Carol was talking about the different points of the criminal justice system yesterday, she did not mention jails. I was like, aha, see, she did not mention jails. So I wanted to give a quick overview of sort of their role in the criminal justice system as sort of a baseline. So when we're talking about jails, these are local lockups. So they are local correctional institutions that are generally at the county level, some are at the city level, and there's about 3,000 jails in the country, so about one per county. And unlike prisons, which generally have people who are sentenced for a year or more, they're post-conviction, jails are multi-use facilities. So jails hold, over half of jail populations are people who are in jail pre-trial awaiting the resolution of their case. But they also have people who are there for a parole or probation violation. They can have people there for state prisons that are overflowing, and so they're holding them there. They have people there for ICE detention. So they are not, they're just a messy place. And depending on your jurisdiction, there could be filled very differently than someone else's. So if you're, for example, in Kentucky uses their jails a lot for state prison overflow. Other places use it almost not at all. Average length of stay is a little over a month, and that's been creeping up. That's gone up 44% over the past decade. So that's the average. The median is a lot shorter. Many people go in jail for 2 days, perhaps, while their case is being resolved or they're making bail. And it's the place where the most people really touch the system, with the exception of arrests. In a given year, over the past decade, the average number of admissions is 10 million admissions in the United States. So it's really a large number of people who end up in jail in a given year for some length of time. And I just wanted to also point out that we know that the jail population has gone down some, it has leveled out, but we still see that there's about 100,000 people in this country who are in jails that are over capacity, over 100% of their capacity. So about 15% of jails in this country are crowded, are overcrowded at any given time. So that's just sort of to level set when we're talking about jails, sort of their place in the criminal justice system and how many people are touched by it. So I wanted to talk about why we undertook this jail data initiative and why jail data is important. I think that nothing has brought this home to me and a lot of people in this country as much as COVID pandemic has. Jails were one of the places that were hotspots for infections throughout this period of time, both for people who were incarcerated in jails and also people working in jails. Jails are just disease incubators. A lot of people in crowded spaces going in and out, back and forth to the community. And it suddenly was like, all right, we don't even know who's in jail for how long and why, and yet we have these people who are being exposed to COVID and other diseases, and it's just not a good place for people with mental health issues. We're gonna have a whole other discussion about jails and behavioral health. They're also expensive. To have a person, people, as I noted, are average of about a month in jail, but sort of like a bed day for a year costs $34,000, or did when we looked at it back in 2017. And nationally, just at the county level, counties are spending over $25 billion a year on jails. So from a taxpayer standpoint, like, how are we using our jails? Are we actually using them in a way that protects public safety? Or are we holding people in jail unnecessarily for low-level offenses or probation violations, potentially because they can't afford a small amount of bail? So, and just from a good governance standpoint, if you've denied someone their freedom and you're holding them in jail, it'd be good to know a little bit more about those people who are in that situation. And, from our perspective as Pew, we're all about good data. We're those data heads they were talking about yesterday. So, like, the fact that that we don't necessarily know who's in jail for how long and why seems really problematic from a good government standpoint, from the ability of decision makers at the county level especially to make, to know what they should be doing to reduce their jail populations. And I would just also mention, like, the prison system is organized at the state level, so I know sometimes it's easier to get data on prisons because there's only 50 prison systems. You're talking about 3,000 jail systems. So this is not, when they talk about there is no criminal justice system, I think jails are a good example of that. This is not a system of jails, it's a bunch of individual jails across the country. So just so you kind of understand what data used to exist or currently exists on the national level, the Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics does an annual jail report. And so I have sort of a back and forth here, and I'm sure that BJS would say I'm being a little snarky, but it's a safe space here. So in December, they released the most recent jail report. But the jail report were for people who were in jail on June 30th of 2021. So the day they released their jail report, the data was already a year and a half old. Now, we know that, that this is not timely, right? We would like to know what's going on in our jails now, or certainly in the past year, and yet the federal data is a year and a half old. There's limited information that they release on the people who are in jail by demographics. For example, there's no information on admissions by race or ethnicity at all. There's sort of a limited one point in time data on some race, nothing on charges. And in fact, what many people don't realize is, though it's supposedly an annual report of jails, it's still only a sample of about 900 jails in 5 years out of 6. So it's not a complete picture. There's very little that we can look at around length of stay, how many people are being admitted. So we felt this was really problematic. And so we worked with NYU's public safety lab to create this jail data initiative. And just for an example of sort of the advantages that we see for it, data goes through the end of the prior month. And actually there's some data that I think you can even get through yesterday. So we're talking really current data. There's data by race, by age, by sex, and unlike BGS, where they ask you like how many men and how many women are in jail, the Jail Data Initiative, JDI, can say how many black males, how many white females. And this, we'll look at some of the data around race. This is important because we're seeing very different trends in some of these when you break it down by both race and sex in the jail populations. Many jails provide charge information, and we're able to look at this issue of, are you using your jail for people who have been accused of violent offenses or for short sentences, or are you using it for people who couldn't make their court date, so you issued a warrant for them, and now they're sitting in jail for some low-level offense. So that, I felt, from your perspective, I hope you'll think about is sort of like knowing who's in your jail and why can sort of talk about like whether your local community is making the best use of this expensive resource. And right now, and we'll talk about the reports in a minute when we go through it, right now there's about 1,300 jails that are in the Jail Data Initiative database, which is more than the average number of jails that are surveyed by BJS 5 years out of 6. when we look at you'll see that if you go back in time, they've been adding jails, so it kind of changes depending on, like if you go all the way back to March 2020, there's about 500 jails, and now we're looking at about 1,300. So, it's still a sample of jails, but it's a pretty big sample. So over a third of the jails in the country. So just real quickly, how does this work? I am not a data scraper. I know nothing about how to do this stuff. But the smart guys at NYU do, and so they've been scraping and stitching together online jail rosters. So you may know whether or not your jail has an online roster. And what they do is they list everyone who's in jail on that day. So what they do is they'll take each of these daily rosters and then create basically a term record. So let's say that John Doe is in jail on Monday of this week, and then he's still there on Tuesday, still there on Wednesday, he's not there on Thursday. They know that John Doe spent 3 days in jail, and they do they use matching to make sure that they have the names. They're able to use this to develop length of stay information, and then the charge data. They worked with another university to sort of aggregate all of these charges, because there's thousands and thousands of little independent charges that every jurisdiction uses, and so they cluster them together to create charge categories. So, it might be like, if you're looking at failure to appear in court, someone might have failure to appear for a misdemeanor. Someone else might have failure to appear for a felony. And so they cluster these together so that they can aggregate this and create some meaningful data that we can use. And so this is the jails right now that have data. So as you can see, some places are very well represented. So Louisiana, we got you. In terms of some of the states in the Midwest, not quite as great of a coverage. So Connecticut doesn't have anything, because Connecticut is a combined jail and prison system, as is Hawaii and Alaska. So some of those you'll see we just don't have, because they don't have jails separate from their prison systems. Okay, any questions so far?
I have one.
Yes.
So I'm seeing Allegheny County lit up there, but not on the website. Has this changed? I'm talking about Pennsylvania.
Ooh, I don't know.
Okay.
It's lit up here, but not on the website right now?
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Sometimes they go down, like the scrapers break, because the county has changed their website, and it might take them a little while to figure out that they're not collecting anymore. So it's an imperfect system that relies on public data from 1,000 jails. So when I look at it, we can take a look at Allegheny either during the presentation or later. Okay, so, and just real quickly, this is kind of what the page looks like, and we'll go through it. There's population trends, which is sort of the bigger picture, and then individual jail profiles. And you can see there it's looking at sort of a jail population for, in this case, it was Jefferson Parish, Louisiana over time, and you can see the charge type. So this is the kind of data that we'll be looking at in a minute. So we, of the past month or so, have been collecting some of the data because we were interested in what we can find out about racial disparities from this data. And so I'm just going to share a few of the graphs that we're going to have in an upcoming report, which I'm happy to send to you. But hopefully this will give you some ideas about ways that you might be able to use the jail data too. So this first one is looking at JDI jails, all the ones that had the data that's available. And what we saw was that in almost 100% of the jails that are in JDI, African Americans, black people, were overrepresented in the jail. So let's say that they were 30% of the county population, they were over 30% of the jail population. And what we found is that, and this is something that federal data doesn't show, we were able to kind of like slice it. So we were able to say, okay, in about a third of the jails, African Americans are overrepresented from a little to up to twice their population in the county. But in 29% of the counties, the percentage of the jail was over 4 times their percentage of people in their county. So that's a lot, right? So if African Americans were 10% of your county, they were 40% of your jail or more. So that was one finding that we had. Another was looking at jail populations since the pandemic. Well, when BJS released their last report, it was as of June 2020. And they touted the fact that there was a 25% drop in the jail population, which was unprecedented. And we had to wait until last month to find out that it had mostly rebounded as of June of 2021, and it's rebounded even more since then. And what we saw is that the rebound has been greater for African Americans than for white individuals. So the population of black individuals now is 8% higher than it was before the pandemic, where for white individuals, it's approximately the same, less than 0.5% more than pre-pandemic. And I would just note that because there is so much variation in terms of which jails break out Hispanic, which break out other races, we don't have good data in JDI by Latino population or Asian population. And so that is one limitation of the data that we have, unfortunately. Another finding was we looked at this length of stay. And what we found is that black individuals on average in 2022 spent 42 days in jail versus white individuals who spent 35 days in jail. So, it's not a huge differential, but it's, a week. So looking at this, we don't have, currently we don't have the ability to look at charges by race. So we can't look at whether there were differences in the charges. We were able to work with John Jay to look at a couple of counties to see, and what we saw there was that black people spent longer in jail even for misdemeanors or for felonies or for traffic. So we saw that they spent more time in jail regardless of the charge severity. We're not able to do that right now with JDI at this time. And then we looked at admissions. So what we saw here is that in 2022, the admission rate for black people was 4 times that for white people. And so this explains obviously why there were there was a greater overall population increase. But when you're looking at the people going into jail, the admissions, the bookings, we saw that black people were admitted 4 times the rate of white people last year. So just real quickly, just like I mentioned earlier, we can look at by race and sex. And so we looked at this recently and we saw that, interestingly, black women had the highest rate of increase of daily admissions in 2022 of any group. So greater than even black men, greater than about almost twice that of white women. And so, this leads lots of questions, like why? We don't know the why. That's like maybe a story that you all can think about, like why are black women going to jail and what are they going to jail for? And this is obviously important because when you think about a woman who goes to jail, she may have young children at home. So she may not have someone who can take care of the kids. She may lose custody of kids. She may lose her job and not be able to care for them if she's the primary caregiver after she gets out. So issues around race and gender become especially important when you think about the downstream impacts of spending time in jail. So this is where I'm supposed to bring up someone from the tech side in the corner there to help me pull up the website. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I would also note that this is a dashboard. So behind the dashboard is all of the data from those rosters. And we made a decision that we did not want to make available the data at the individual level because, as I mentioned, half of these people are unconvicted who are in jail. And we did not want to have people's names like John Doe himself, like let's look at John Doe's record. We don't want everyone to be able to see John Doe's record in jail over the past year. And so we do have, for research purposes, we do work or we can work with individuals who are doing research. We could possibly work with, under certain circumstances with the media so that we can look deeper at some of these issues. But for the dashboard, we don't have individual level data. So just because, and interestingly, when we did a webinar on this, when we first released it at the end of last year, there was someone from like a collection agency who had signed up. I was like, we are not giving this to collection agencies. Okay. So there's two pieces to this, and we'll look at the population trends first, and I use Windows, so if I'm stumbling around, I apologize. So when you open it up on the Jail Data Initiative, you'll see this page, which is sort of the front page of it. And so the first thing you'll see is this population since COVID-19. So you can see here, this is the big dip here in the population, and the scale changes on the side. So this is jaildatainitiative.org if you do want to follow along on your phone or on your computer. And then you can see the steady increase in the jail population since then. Interestingly, jails tend to let people out at the holidays. Who knew? So the last couple weeks of December, you can see these annual dips. So then this is looking at releases minus admissions. So over this period of time, if it's green, that means more people were released than admitted. If it's red, it means more people were admitted than released. And so you can see this trend here where generally over this period of time that more people were admitted than released since the pandemic. And then this is, and again, this is 485 rosters, so those are the jails that they had since they started in March of 2020. And if you change, I'll show you how to rejigger that so that you can look at more recent and have more jails. You can see here that you can look at the average population per 100,000 county residents. So that's looking at like how much of a jail incarcerator your county is. And you can also look at releases and admissions here. And then this is length of stay for those released. So you can see that most people stay a day or 2 days in jail. And then there's, as it goes over time, each of these is a longer length of stay to the last one, which is a year or more. They were in jail a year or more at the time they were released. So if you go to, and then you can create a PDF of this. You can create an Excel file, a CSV, so you can make your own graphics, whoever is making graphics in your newsroom. And you can pull all of the historical data, which we won't do. We'll still be sitting here at 2:30 waiting for it because it's a big file. But you can if you want to do that. And then you can filter the data, and this is where, come on. There we go. Okay, so you can filter it by age. So if you just want to look at, say, young adults, or maybe you're doing a story on older adults in jail, you can look at people who are in these older age ranges as well. You can look at gender, so female or male. You can click on those. There aren't that many that actually have non-binary or trans, but a few jails do have that. And then you have the date ranges. So one of the ones that I have found useful is looking at last year to date versus this year to date. Let's just apply that so you can see what it looks like. And here you can see, because jails are cyclical in terms of, you want to look at their times compared to like the same date last year. So you can see gosh darn it. Come on, there we go. Look at the average percentage, and this is looking at year-over-year percentage change in average daily population. So the ones that are darker saw larger increases in average daily population this year compared to last year. And here's where you can see like the average length of stay and how it changed. You can look at the percentage, and you can see here that the number of people who stayed in jail over a year was an increase of 146%. So there's not a lot of people in that category, but we've seen a big increase in the number staying in jail a very long time. And obviously this has implications for sort of a constitutional right to a speedy trial, has questions about like, are people being held for low bail? If you're thinking about jail costing, $34,000 a year and someone's being held because they couldn't pay $300 bail, then the questions are, is that really a good use of our money? So I'll look at jail profiles next. And this is looking at, I should probably, stop. Tracy, go back to jail trends. So if you go back to jail trends, you can also filter it by, say, state or county here too. So you can look at some of these bigger trends. So, and it's only for the jails that are in there. So obviously a state that has more jails represented is going to represent a clearer picture of that state. So like Louisiana had a lot of folks. So if you want to look at just what was going on in Louisiana over this time frame, you can do that, and it'll show you of those 43 jails, what Louisiana looked like And you can see here, the counties that have a higher daily jail population per 100,000 residents than others. So, and then you can zoom in on a county and it'll say like Caldwell Parish and what their population is and what their jail population is. So, yeah, okay. So if you look at jail profiles, so I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, so we can just pull that up. And if a place doesn't have the data that you're looking for, it won't allow you to check by it. So let's say they didn't have race data in Prince George's County, it wouldn't let you be able to sort by that. So here's Prince George's County. So here's what that jail profile looks like. The red bars are days that, for whatever reason, the county didn't post jail data. It could be that their system was down or something. So there's some gaps there. You can see that there's less than 5% of the days are missing. But you can see the increase in the population there. Prince George's County is, let's hang on a second. So Prince George's County has a high share of the jail, 49% that are in there for violent charges. So, if I'm thinking about it from the perspective of reporting on my own county, you could say, well, that's probably a good thing, right? They're not using it for a lot of misdemeanors. They're not using it for a lot of public order offenses. And you can see here, you might say, oh, this is kind of interesting because when you look at the length of stay, fewer people are staying a day than nationally. And, maybe you might want to look at what that might imply for the people, why that's happening. So here you can see it has the demographics of the people who are in jail compared to the county population. You can see that the county has, the population is 65.7% black and the jail is 80.8% black. So it's in that category of 0 to twice as disproportional. And then you can actually look at all of the charges of all the people who are in jail over that period of time, and you can go through. There's lots of pages here, and it'll show you, and you can download this if you wanted to sort of create your own table to say, why are people in jail? And then if you do you could do a PDF of this page, and this is something that county officials like because they like to have something that in front of them that they can show and share with folks. So so that's what the PDF is sort of aimed for. Yes. Uh-oh, where did it go? I have no idea where it went. And there's a PDF somewhere, which I can't find because we're doing the screen mirroring. But it's kind of a clean sheet. Other than that, like looking at looking at different time frames for this, you could look at this one for reasons that are unclear to me, don't have the other one. It could be something to do with it. But let's look at Allegheny County, Pennsylvania is the one that you were talking about. Let's just see if we can find it and see what's going on. It's not there. So it could mean that there's something going on with their system. But here you can see this is Berks County. So Berks County actually has not seen the increase that some places have seen in terms of, here's their year to date. You can see that they've had a little bit of a flatter for whatever reason. They also have an average population of 704. So I guess I would just maybe stop there and see like your thoughts on what's useful about this, what you'd like to see, any questions you might have on how to use it, et cetera, et cetera.
Hi, I'm Samuel Belilti from Miami.
Hi.
And actually I'm looking for Miami-Dade County and I can't find it.
Okay.
I don't know if it is I am using it wrong or it's not there.
It's probably not there.
It is not there, you said?
We can look at it real quick, but if you can't find it, it probably means they don't have an online roster.
Correct, that's what it said.
Yeah.
This county has no roster. So what does it mean and how it impacts the total result?
Right. So if they don't have an online roster, then two things. One is you can go to their site yourself, or I could go to it if I could figure out how to use this, and see if they have any information on the people in jail that's publicly available. If they don't have publicly available data, then we're not able to use it. We've had a couple of jails who are like, well, we'd like to have our information in here because it's actually easier for us, because some of these counties use a vendor that they can't get their own data out without having to pay someone to run the reports. So they were like, hey, we would be willing to give you our data so that we can run the reports we're interested in running without having to pay some external vendor. So I would suggest that you go to your county and ask them if they have jail data available, and would they be willing to share it, either through something like this or to you as a newsroom. Because they all have it. I mean, Miami-Dade's a big county, right? It's one of the biggest, and so I'm sure they have the jail data available. In terms of transparency, I mean, I think the question is whether they're willing to share it with you.
When you tried to do this investigation, did you check with them? I'm sorry, did you check with them? Why not? With them, I'm talking about Miami because it's the one I look for, but I assume that there are other areas in the country that were not available either for whatever reason. So my question to you, is this impacting the total result? If I go to Florida, of course it is impacting if Miami-Dade is not reflected somehow. So did you ask why, or I don't know, it's a procedural question.
Right. So it looks like they have it set up so you have to search by inmate. So that means that like a lot of other places will have a full, so you would have to know that I'm not a robot. Don't make me do this. Okay, so, but so you would have to have the information. So they clearly have it behind a wall that you can't get at. You have to have the name of the person that you're looking for. So the question would be, we don't ask them with 3,000 jails, like, why do you do it this way and not the other? Like if you go to, like just to show you what a roster looks like. I'm not going to subscribe to your stuff. Well, I can't find it right now. But I'm going to go back to the... So, all right, let's just pull this up here, because I think we can pull it up here. If you go to your documentation of a jail profile, it shows you the page that we're getting this from. So here's the Autauga County Sheriff's Office page, and you can look at the bookings of all of the people who are in the jail at that time. So you can look, if your jail is in JDI and you want to get more information about individuals, you can go and find the inmate roster, and it'll show you, like this one shows you all of the people who are in this jail on that date. And as you can see, there's multiple pages. So what we do is we scrape all of, by we, I mean NYU scrapes all of this information once a day and aggregates it into a file.
Silly question.
No.
I'm looking through, as you're going through this presentation, and I'm noticing that some of our areas aren't on there. Is there a way to encourage law enforcement to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth outreaching to them and finding out, letting them know that this exists and saying you'd like to see their data up here too. We've talked about how to increase it from a third of the jails to, at least half of the jails. And we don't really have an outreach plan, but that's something we're talking about. And so in terms of, how do we increase the transparency here? And, the more data that we have, the more accurate it will be and the more helpful it will be. So, certainly we're open to reaching out. If you reach out and they're like, we don't know how to do this or whatever, we're happy to connect with them and see if there's a way to even back channel it. So, if they don't have an online roster, like in Miami-Dade, maybe there's a way that they can just feed it to us so that it just gets uploaded directly without having to be filtered through the internet, which is basically what we're doing now.
Okay. Does private ownership ever play a part in how they gather or the lack of gathering in some places?
I don't know. Basically it's been what's been out there that we can find and going through county by county. In terms of like having a third-party vendor who's managing it, I don't know if that will play a role too, because obviously, if someone's able to get the information about the jail without paying a vendor, they probably aren't keen on that. So I don't know if that would affect their willingness to put it online or not.
You asked what we wanted to see, and I don't
Yeah.
know if this is possible, but I am in Louisiana, and all of North Louisiana is the dark blue,
Okay.
which means they have the heavy population. But I'm thinking the heavy population is from all the transfers from other states and South Louisiana. So can you isolate who is a transfer and if that crime actually happened there?
Oh, that's a good question. So can you give me a county and I can look at it and we can maybe look and see if they have the charge types, and that might be able to help us understand if their transfers are being held for the prison. Like what would be a county that you'd like me to pull up here?
Let's see.
Or excuse me, a parish.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's do Webster Parish.
Okay. Okay, so here's Webster Parish. Their data got better over time. So we can look at the charge types, and this jail does not provide information on charge types. So unfortunately, that would be a place where you might be able to see if they're being held for another jail or they're being transferred. So, so that particular jail does not provide charge types.
Is there a reason why a jail would show up in jail profiles but not in the population trends page? Like I can find one when I search for it in jail profiles but not filtering it in population.
Interesting. Is it, the only thought I had was that, is it a county that has more than one jail?
Yeah.
Then let's talk afterwards and I'll figure out. I mean, a lot of this is like finding bugs and trying to fix them. So yeah, for sure, let me know and we'll see if we can figure out what's going on. And same thing with like Allegheny County, like why it disappeared.
Thank you. Fascinating data, thank you.
Thank you.
If we're finding extreme outliers looking on this, is that more likely to be the result of a delay in data, a delay in the jail uploading it, or is it possibly like a single sting that I'm looking at a day where in a predominantly African American county, an increase of 26 white women in the jail population, is that more likely to be the result of a specific sting, or is this like maybe there was a issue with the jail? Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and I can't think how it could be a data issue. It seems more likely, unless it was like somebody in that county just didn't get around to they ended up logging them in the next day or something. So I can't speak to that. It could have been something like, let's say there's a women's prison that was overcrowded, and they were like, hey, can you hold these women for us? It could be that I'm just trying to like ballpark what could be some reasons. So.
What were you saying earlier about the Hispanic and Asian data that you don't have as much, or you can't aggregate it in the same way?
Yeah, right now the only way that we have it is as it's basically other people of color. So if they're not identified as African American, but they are identified as Hispanic or another ethnicity or another race, they're sort of all together, and it just has to do with some jails not necessarily identifying them. And I know there's someone here from Baltimore, so you can tell me if this is hypocritical, but I had heard that the Baltimore police, when they started, someone was like, well, there's nobody Hispanic in your data, and they're like, oh, we just put them under Asian because there's not that many, so we just put them in the same category. So if the Baltimore reporter can tell me if that, I had heard that that's what the police in Baltimore were doing, because they didn't bother to actually try that hard to. Okay. You don't know. Okay. So yes, there's garbage in, garbage out. And so, we just don't have that good data, and a lot of jails don't have data on ethnicity, so Hispanic is difficult, and so then you've got the Baltimore police. So, yeah. Well, I guess I would just say, if there aren't any other questions, I'm happy to, look at your particular county and your jail, help you look at your data. If there's ways that we can make this dashboard more useful for you, we ran it by National Association of Counties, and they kind of told us what was important to them as county officials, but, we want this to be useful for the media as well. If you do have a special report and you want individual data, reach out to us and we can work with NYU to get you that, like if you're really interested in certain things. I mean, one of the other things we're able to look at is like the number of times that people go to jail. So you've got 10 million admissions, but that's not 10 million people. We know that some people cycle in and out of jails multiple times, especially people with mental health and substance use issues, people who are homeless. So that's one area that we're interested in sort of taking a harder look at is, who are the people who are cycling through jails and probably also emergency rooms and probably also, homeless facilities. And because they're very, they have multiple issues, expensive for the county to deal with, and jails probably aren't the right place for them. They're probably the place of last resort for them, for the county.
Tracy, thank you so much for walking us through this resource. As well as for your generous offer of getting into like very specific data with folks.
All right.